Hey, what's happening, Roadies? This is Joel Anke.
This is Kevin Doogie Dugan.
What's happening, Roadies? This is Leo Beattie, and you're listening to Roadie Free Radio. So let's kick them out, motherfuckers.
What's up, Roadies? My name is Larry Milburn, and this is Roadie Free Radio, your VIP pass to meet and greet the stars behind the scenes of the music and film business. Christmas, Roadies. Welcome to episode 115. This is your host, Uncle Larry Milburn. I am coming at you from a barn in Northwest Connecticut. How are you? Happy holidays. What's going on, man? I hope you guys are well. I am fired up for today's episode. I can't even tell you. We got a great guy today. I'm super excited. Leo Beattie, former roadie for the MC5, Iggy and the Stooges, my friends. This guy has put some time in. He hit it. He got into it from Detroit, and then he got out. But we had a great chat, so I can't wait to get to that. We got lots going on. As I said, today is Christmas Eve when this episode is dropping. So if you're listening, after Christmas Eve, Merry Christmas to you. If you're tuning in today for the first time, Merry Christmas to you. Thanks for coming by. We are super excited to have you as part of the group. And hey, if you guys have been sticking around for the last 114 episodes, guess what? Thank you too. You know I love you, and I hope you're doing well. All right, we got a lot to get to today, my friends. I am fired up. First of all, Merry Christmas, okay? If you celebrate Christmas, if you're doing anything festive this week, I want to send lots of love to you, lots of good holiday cheer. I hope you are surrounded by loved ones, and I hope that you are well and safe, and you get everything that you want and you deserve on this fantastic last couple of holidays of 2018 as we start barreling toward 2019, baby. It's going to be another great year. A lot of good hustles coming up. So, Merry Christmas to you. Here we go. Guys, last week's episode with Ace Piva was so well received. I thank you. I thank you for tuning in. Look, this can be a tough time of year. I did a bunch of posts about this week during the week when Ace's episode came out, 114, for those of you taking score. Put a bunch of posts out. This can be a tough time for people. So head back, listen to Ace's episode. If you are struggling with addiction or recovery, or you know someone that is, or you have a family member that is, please do not hesitate to get them help. There are many ways that you can do so. And if you check out Ace's foundation called overthebridge.org, there's a lot of great resources there for you to check out. So go ahead and do so. Anyway, thank you for all the support on that. We've got a lot of Christmas birthday love that I want to shout out to some peeps as well. Here we go. Ready? Birthdays in and around Christmas belong to Carrie Keyes, Katrine Audison, Jim Weeder, Chris Reitzman, Leroy Parnell, Carly Scoville, Tom Hambridge, and Frank Gallagher. I know I'm missing some people on that list, but this is just what Facebook told me about. And again, I love it when I see past guests' names pop up in the old Facebook feed, and we have a chance to shout out to them. So I wanted to give them some Christmas love. Also, congrats to former guest John Kane, who sat in episode 50, going way back to episode 50, man. The two guests were John Kane and Bill Hanley. We were celebrating Bill's life and his career as not only a legend in the audio industry, but he was also the front of house guy for the original Woodstock Festival 1969. So we are congratulating John Kane, who has been working and sweating it out on a book called about Bill's life called The Last Seat in the House, The Story of Hanley Sound. He has finally found a publisher over at the University Press of Mississippi. I'm not 100% sure when the book is coming out, but you're going to want to check it out. It's some good stuff. We will stay in touch with him about that. And also, before we get to this episode, guys, I am very excited, very proud to announce that we have a new sponsor here at Roadie Free Radio. Is there a bell? There's nothing around. I'll shake my keys. Oh, listen, it's kind of like jingle bells. Oh, it's Christmas. Come early, kids. Listen, we got a new sponsor. I am super excited to announce Stage Hands Clothing is now a sponsor of Roadie Free Radio. Based in Chicago, this husband and wife team have created the one-stop shop for backstage professionals who are always working hard behind the scenes and count on high-quality, durable workwear. These guys carry everything from men's and women's apparel and plenty of super cool gear and gadgets to keep you guys ready for the next task. All right? Check them out, stagehandsclothing.com. Use the code Roadie. You get yourself 20% off your entire order. That's Roadie. When you head over to stagehandsclothing.com, use that code, get yourself 20% off. All right. Thank you guys. Thank you, Stage Hands, for coming on board. We appreciate the love. I think this is going to be a really good match. I'm going to give them all to you, actually. You know what? Why not? Here we go. Stage Hands Clothing, you're the first one up. Gig-gear.com for you guys looking for the gig gloves for the two-hand touch. Head over to gig-gear.com. Use the code Roadie to get you 15% off. And you can also head over to Show Pro Beard Co. and use the code Roadie. You'll get yourself 20% off their amazing beard bombs for those of you bearded wonders out there hitting the road. All right, that's it. That's all I'm going to go on about. You know I love you. You know I'm psyched to have you. And this is just a great holiday. And again, I really, honest and truly wish you the best. Thank you for tuning in. Today's guest, as I said, is Mr. Leo Beattie from Detroit, Michigan. Was a roadie. Was one of the original road crew for the MC5, Iggy and the Stooges, Mitch Ryder. Started out on the road when he was 18 years old. 18, man. Moved out of his house, started helping bands, and the rest is kind of history. He had a nice little blip in the business, and got out, started a whole second career. You're going to hear all about it. Sweetheart of a guy, Night Bob. Night Bob, you did a good one. This was a great one. Thank you, buddy, for this suggestion to have Leo on the show. I'm very, very proud to have him here and celebrate Christmas with him and all of you. All right, guys. So here we go. Kick back, get your presents out, put your feet up. It's been a long, long holiday week. You've done a lot of stuff. Pour yourself a little eggnog, maybe drop a little something extra into it if that's what you're into. All right. The kids are asleep. This episode's going to get a little funky. All right. So make sure the kids and the wife are asleep and get those Christmas lights ablazing. Here we go. Mr. Leo Beattie.
Hit it. Call yourself a roadie. Call yourself a roadie. Call yourself a roadie.
Merry Christmas, dude.
Hey, Merry Christmas to you, Larry.
It is so great to have you. Bob has been telling me about you for a while and, has been bugging me to get you on the show and it's happening and here we are. And it was so great to read this document that you sent. I thank you for that. And then to spend the morning going through and reading about the MC5 and Iggy and the Grand Ballroom and just, a lot of things from this era, which I kind of knew, but I didn't know it. This was always on my radar growing up. But I didn't deep dive into this stuff. So it's great to have you and to be able to talk about some of this stuff and your history in this, your part in all of this, and then your subsequent second chapter, which we spoke a little bit about on the phone, is super interesting. So without delaying this, man, how the fuck are you? Let's get into it.
I'm really good, Larry. I've been anticipating this. I remember Night Bob saying to me, Leo, there's a guy and he's got this blog and he interviews the roadies. It's Roadie Free Radio. You should be on there. And I was like, yeah, I'd like that,
Yeah.
And it's like, we're the guys that aren't seen. And that's the way it's supposed to be, know?
Yep.
So to have the opportunity to get to come out from behind the curtain, so to speak, and tell some of my stories, it's great. It's just a great. I've really been relishing this moment.
Cool, man. Well, it is great to have you here, and great to spend some Christmas time with you, and
yes.
And help us bring in the new year of lots of good opportunities for everybody. So, I know that we'll get to this part, but I know that you started a whole second chapter basically in the mid-'70s, right? Was that
Yes.
around the time you got out?
Yeah.
Early mid 70s, and but you got out of it for reasons. It was taking a toll on your friends and people around you and whatnot, and you sounds like and reads like, from what I've read, you were one of the lucky ones, man. It's pretty crazy. But I imagine and I know that you look back at this time with fondness.
Yes, I do, Larry. And at that point in time when I made that decision, in my mind, I mentioned you had said, what about a mentor or mentors? And I put Zeke Zentner as one of my mentors. And Zeke died from a heroin overdose. And that was kind of the straw to break the camel's back at that point in time. And I had other dreams for my life in rock and roll. That lifestyle was not fulfilling them. And I was paying I had paid a price. And I just couldn't take it any further at that time, but from high school up to that moment, those are some good times. Yeah. There's just no way around it. And looking back 50 years later, and seeing the significance of that period, in the moments there, we were just doing it. Yeah. We were just making it happen. Yeah. And there was no terminology, front line, back line. I see all of this today and I'm like, oh, okay. So it's it's matured, Yeah. Oh, yeah. And yeah.
I mean, when you talk to buddies, I imagine you must stay in touch. You seem like the kind of guy who stays in touch with a lot of your old friends, guys like Bob and whatnot. And, do you just shake your head at like what it's become?
Yeah. I volunteered to do the 50th reunion of the Grande Ballroom, and I was coordinating stage, and it was interesting that the Yardbirds played, and the roadie that was with them, I hear somebody call, "Hey, Henry," and I'm like, "Henry," and I look, and it's Henry, the roadie from Led Zeppelin, who was at the Boston Garden, and we had the fight, and walked over, and he remembered the episode. And it was just felt so good to be in that environment, to see somebody from that period and have it confirmed again what part I was there at that point in time. Yeah. Because there's times when it's like, was I really there? Right. Was I there? And then you see somebody or you see a picture and it confirms for you that all really happened.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Now this fight, we're going to get to the fight. I marked that down. And just so I understand, this was a fight between Zeppelin's guys and you guys?
No, it was between Zeppelin's guys and my guys. And we were fighting the stagehands of the Boston Gardens.
Oh, you're fighting the locals.
Yeah, the local stagehands.
The fucking Boston guys.
Yeah. We need a tip.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That must have been a fierce. How many roadies did you guys have?
I had 4 guys with me, and there was Henry, and he had 2 guys, so there was about 7 of us. Uh-huh. And there had to be 6 or 8 of them. It was pretty even. And there was a construction going on in the Boston Garden. There were cinder blocks and 2x4s where you had to go all the way from the stage to across the arena to the rear, and you were upstairs, and there was a ramp where the trucks went down. And when it started, there was 2x4s flying, and my one friend got hit in the head with a cinder block, and I teed off on a guy and kicked him in the nuts. He went down face first, and he didn't get up. My brother-in-law was running as I'm driving the truck down the ramp. The guys are chasing him, and he hits them. The guy, he was running. There was some guys in front of him. He hit him, and they scattered like bowling pins. It was just wild. And we got outside. They were chasing us down the sidewalk. We pulled up onto the sidewalk, opened the door, and we were bouncing guys off the wall of the Boston Garden. Then we got out front. We told the police we were having a problem with these guys, and they said, "Well, where are you guys from?" And we said, "Well, we're from Detroit." And he goes, "What are you guys doing here? You need to go home." And that was it. You need to go home. And so we weren't getting any help.
Wow. This was after the gig?
After the gig.
How was the gig itself? I mean, I saw that bill and I was like, holy shit, that must have been epic, man.
It was a great night. You know, it was Johnny Winter was, you know, still breaking out. He was getting a big push.
Yeah.
And then it was MC5 and Zeppelin. In like 4 days, I noticed that the second album was released. And we got a copy of it. We took it back to Ann Arbor with us. Wow. And we had some Red Splash, so we listened to that when we got home and we're just blown away. But Zeppelin was just on. Yeah, you know, they were coming on real strong. We did a gig at the Olympia in Detroit. And the stage was maybe chest high on the crowd. You know, when he did the Lemon song, the one girl reached up and was grabbing Robert Plant's nuts, you know, and stroking them. And that's the kind of stuff that went on because you had access.
Right.
You know?
Right.
There was you didn't have to have a badge that said all access. Pretty much you had access. You know, you kept the crowd from backstage, but out front, you got to participate on a level that you don't see today.
You know, when I was reading this morning about MC5 and how they went on tour with opening for people in the beginning when they were, you know, breaking whatnot, you know, like Big Brother and everything, how they were blowing openers off the stage. Yeah. I imagine that night that wasn't the case though with the Zeppelin.
No, Zeppelin, you know, they were
in the prime. Right?
Yeah, they were in their prime, and they had something that nobody else had. Mm-hmm. You know, and it connected.
Yeah.
And there was that history. You had Jimmy Page coming out of the Yardbirds, and then the rest of it was all pretty much unknowns. But they had an energy and a sound.
Yeah.
That was beyond anything that had happened up to that point. You know, the Five were another entity in and of themselves, but Zeppelin. What can you say?
Right.
You know?
Right.
Yes.
I caught Led Zeppelin. You know, Bob does sound for Led Zeppelin.
Yeah.
And I caught them and at the Gramercy, which is a room. I love that room. Now, I've been there twice now. I really like that room because it kind of reminds me of like what an old school, you know, hall or whatever would be like. And, man, they're awesome. Those ladies can play, and they bring it, man.
They come through Detroit, and I'm going to have to go see them. I've put them on my list. You know, I have a list. I still go to shows.
Cool.
I struggle with being in the audience, but I will subject myself to that from time to time.
Yeah.
Because I always get the yakking guy next to me or the obnoxious guy, and I want to knock them on their ass.
Yeah.
Larry,
no, I hear you. We went. I took my wife on a redo. It was our 5th year anniversary in September. I botched it. And our plans fell through. And so I did a redo, and I took her to see Dave Matthews at the Garden.
Nice.
And sitting behind her were 2 fucking yayos who didn't shut up the entire time, standing there behind her. And I don't even think they were drunk. It wasn't like they were drunk and, you know, it's like, all right, guys, you got to chill. They just didn't stop talking about, like, I don't know, you know, just like life shit. And it was like, guys, what are you doing? You know, there's magic moments happening in front of you down there. A, and B, you're fucking up our show, you know?
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly.
It's crazy.
And I'd like to take this moment to speak to the audience and say, you guys, shut up. Enjoy the show.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. It's like, what did you pay for? I met Jeff Beck at the Fillmore in Detroit, and these guys are remembering all the times they've seen him. I said, hey, how about tonight? Do you mind if I see him tonight?
Did you say that?
And yeah, I bit my tongue as long as I could.
Yeah,
and I didn't want to offend him.
Yep.
But I was ready to throw down. Yep. You know, and it's just like, guys.
Yeah.
Come on. Yeah. Robin Trower, it was Jeff Beck again this summer at Pine Knob DTE Energy Theater. 2 guys in front of me, like 2 little girls. They were so excited, Larry. And I finally had to say, I said, look, guys. You got to give me a break here. I'm trying to listen to him.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just amazing. But
it almost, I don't know, it's weird. It almost seems like it's happening more.
Yeah.
That there's a disconnect between, and I don't know if it's the smartphone culture that's done this or what it is, but it just feels like, I mean, again, I went to Tedeschi Trucks earlier in the summer this year. And a few other shows, you know, and ran into friends, and they were all just livid that people are standing around talking, you know, and not engaging and not watching and taking it in. And you know, when you see musicians that are playing from the heart in the moment.
Yeah.
It's an amazing thing, and you can go on that journey with them. But if you're not engaged because you're talking about, whatever the hell you're talking about, you're going to miss out. So,
yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Back in the day, the audiences were totally engaged, and today, it's a real. They're missing it.
Yeah. Well, I wonder, and we can talk to this a little bit. I wonder, because again, with groups like the groups that you worked with, and at that time, 68, 72, 65, whatever it was, all the incarnations of the Yardbirds and the Beatles and all that shit. I think, I'm going to put this out there. I think people may have been more engaged in that time and up through, let's say, 80s, 90s maybe, because it was all new, right? It was all happening for the first times, let's say, right? I mean, you're breaking new ground. So, and you also had something to fight against, right? I mean, MC5, very politically motivated for a time, so there's that aspect of it. And these were like happenings, right?
Yes.
Now everybody knows what the Kardashians' ass looks like, and there's no mystery to a lot of this stuff.
Yes.
So, and it's become all this sort of, virtual type thing where I can watch you on screen doing your thing, and I can buy your album at the same time on my phone. So, and then I can check the news real quick and get a tweet from, my girlfriend.
Yeah. Yeah. I kind of like what Jack White does now. He takes your phone. Jack White just said, you got to check your phone at the door.
Does he?
You're coming to, yeah. They've got some system.
Wow.
You get a little pouch and you put your phone in it. And he's like, hey, I don't want those phones in my show. So he's taking an action against it. I don't know that it's a solution, but I got to agree with you about we were more engaged. It was all new. There was the mystery, the mystique. Yeah. And today everything is so available that it really does take away from that piece of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, cool, man. Let's go. Yeah. Let's jump in. So born in 1950, Detroit, Michigan.
Yes.
Prodigal son of 11 brothers and sisters, man. The oldest. That is crazy.
Yeah. It's ironic you called me the prodigal son, because that's what my father would say when I'd come in from the road. He goes, the prodigal returns. And I didn't really know the story of the prodigal. Right. Now I do. Yeah. And I was the prodigal son.
I bet, man. My God. What did your folks do?
My dad was a screw machine operator. He worked at Bauer Roller Bearing in Detroit. And then that company moved. And he went to work for a guy he worked with, opened his own shop. And my dad worked there 6 days a week, 7 days a week, and raised and fed 11 kids.
And
hard work.
I take it Mom was a mom.
Mom, yeah, she was a stay-at-home mom. She got the oatmeal on the table in the morning and got all 11 of us out the door to school. And yeah, I look back on that and go, how did he do that?
Yeah.
How did you do that?
we have one 3-year-old, and it's like... It's like a circus around here in the morning.
Yeah, I had 2 daughters, and I made a decision that I wasn't going to have all those children, and pay more attention to my daughters, and it's worked out real well.
Yeah, good. So tell me about 1950s Detroit. Let's put that into context a little bit. Just a few ideas on what the hell was going on in Detroit in the 1950s. Obviously, car boom, right?
Yeah, the auto industry was booming. My dad was making good money. Everybody was making good money. That after World War II, Detroit was very alive. And through the 50s, we had the Hudson's Day Parade down on Woodward. And, everybody and their brother turned out for that. The company my dad, Bauer Roller Bearing, they had a Christmas party, and you walked in and Santa was there and there were gifts. And it just seemed like everything was available.
Yeah.
And the sky was the limit.
Yep.
There was really, I have to call it was almost magical.
Yep.
As a kid growing up in Detroit, neighborhoods, subdivisions, suburbs was just expanding, new cars everywhere. On my street, a guy drove a Chrysler Turbine car home from work. He had it. So it was like you were seeing the future, driving around your neighborhood. And it really was, really a magical time. It's still black and white TV. We had a lot of kids' TV shows.
Yep.
You know, we had Soupy Sales, and I used to love watching Soupy in the morning. He was my guy. We had Milky the Clown and Bozo and the whole thing. And there was a talent show, Starlit Stairway, and you would see tap dancers and accordion players and all of that was going on. In Detroit, there was I was too young to experience it, but there was a whole show bar scene going on, and there were a lot of places for musicians to perform in the 50s.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome.
But
and then you got 1957, Mr. Elvis Presley in his prime. Right. So now it's starting to shake up the music thing a bit. I imagine Detroit, prior to the 60s was a big music town, right?
Yes. Yeah. And I had an uncle, and he emulated Elvis. He played drums, and he had the pants with the stripe down the side and the T-bird, and he was all in.
Wow.
So I would see him and had the hair going and the whole 9 yards, and you could see it take hold.
Yeah.
I could see it right there, that whole rock and roll scene influence.
And were you in also at that point as a young kid? 10 years old?
I was 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. I had an aunt, and I would spend a lot of time with her, and she listened to the rock music on the radio, and I was picking up on it then, and that was where my exposure started, was riding around with Aunt Dell, listening to it on the radio. Jack the Bellboy and the Detroit DJs that were playing it.
Yeah.
And going into the 60s, just to jump a little bit.
Sure.
Her son, my cousin Dickie Knight, played the Rolling Stones' Little Red Rooster for me at Christmas, speaking as seeing how appropriate it is here. It's Christmas time. And he played that for me. And I was just transported and overwhelmed by it. And I said, play it again, man. And it was like nothing I had ever heard.
Really?
And it captured me. And then it was like, okay. And that was Rolling Stones Now, Little Red Rooster. And that was the start of my Rolling Stones, fandom.
Yeah. You still a big fan today?
Still a fan,
You're going to get to see them. They're coming around again.
Yeah. I saw them in Detroit at they opened up the Ford Field. It was the first show there, and I saw that tour. I sat in the end zone about halfway up, and it was like sitting in your living room. The mix, everything was beautiful.
Yeah.
I couldn't have had a better spot.
Nice. When was that?
That was that was 15 years ago.
Okay.
2003, 2004, right in that time frame. And there was a group came in, and they were causing a lot of trouble. and I said, here they are. And the Detroit police came down finally and had to step in, and they were taking them out. And as they were taking him out, the one guy got the cop on the ground, and I was on the aisle, and I reached over and I pushed him on the ground, and I stepped on his neck with my foot, and I stood on his neck until the cop could pick him up, because I got tear gassed, and they interrupted my experience, So I was not happy.
Legit, they're doing tear gas.
Yeah, they had I got tear gas, and I mean, it was just getting nasty. And his girlfriend's going, "Leave him alone." And I said, "You need to back the fuck up." And the cop got up, put the cuffs on this guy, and then he took him up the steps by the handcuffs, bouncing his head off the steps on the way out. And it was like,
Jesus.
It was
Detroit's no joke.
No,
Detroit is no joke, man.
And I was like, "This is great. I get to see the Rolling Stones, get involved in a fight, and be on the right side."
Right. Exactly. This is like old times.
Yeah. It was a great experience. I'm 60 years old. I'm 56, 57 years old, and I still get to get it, mix it up. And
speaking of the Stones and Jeff Beck, do you know who Dave Natal is?
No, I don't know that name.
Dave is the Stones front of house engineer. And he's also Beck's. So if you saw Beck this summer, then Dave probably did the mix.
I sat right in front of the board intentionally. I said, I want to sit right in front of the board, and it was an outstanding show.
Yeah, check out his episode. I had him on earlier this year. Can't remember.
Dave Natal.
Dave Natal. Great guy.
Okay.
Great guy. No, I mean, he's been with the Stones for I think at least 15 years.
Yeah.
And,
It was always, that was an ambition of mine, was to work for the Stones, but it didn't happen.
Yeah.
You know, there was a guy, Chooch McGee, who was from Utica, Michigan, just outside of Mount Clemens. And Chooch he was Keith's guitar tech for years and years. And the keyboard player for Mitch Ryder in Detroit, Harry Phillips, was good friends with Chooch. And I always kind of thought, well, good for him.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
He got it.
That seems like an organization that, like, once you're in, you try to stay in, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe you're not let out.
Yeah, I believe. Yeah, the paychecks are going to be consistent, and they're going to be,
Yeah.
good. And
man.
and that was part of it too for me in the beginning. It just got to a point. I'd go out on the tour. I was working out of Chrysalis there, and when the tour ended, I'm back in Detroit, and they're in the Bahamas, and there's nothing going on.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you're a free agent.
So, 1965, you got here Shagmore Line.
Yeah, those were a group of guys in high school, and Jan Ernst played guitar, and he worked at the music store at the Mount Clemens Guitar Center, and I would hang out there after school, and I was attracted to the musicians. I can't play a note, Larry.
You can't?
No. My brother plays. Everybody else in the family can play. Leo can't. I can turn the dials and get the money at the end of the night, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But drive the truck. But those guys, they were into the Beatles, and they put a band together, and they were really talented young guys. This was I was a sophomore, junior in high school.
Yeah.
And I lugged their equipment around because I had a car, so I could help out.
It's always the guy with the car, man.
Yeah, and did a couple things for them. And excuse me.
It's all right. You're 15. It's 1965. We got a little Beatlemania happening, right?
Yeah, these guys are into the Beatles,
right? And early Stones. And what are you thinking? What kind of student were you? Were you one of the athletes?
Wasn't an athlete. I was kind of low key.
Yeah.
I was already growing my hair. Breaking the rules. We were breaking the rules. I was cutting the guy's hair at the house so that we were legal, but it was longer than most guys, but we just flirting with the edge,
Right.
And
1 inch, no 1 inch above the collar shit.
Yeah. And I was wearing blue jeans, and that was against the rules. And, so I was a rule breaker. I wasn't a troublemaker, but I was a rule breaker.
That's interesting. That's an interesting, depiction. Not depiction, but what do they call that? A difference. There's a difference there, right? You can be a rule breaker and not be a troublemaker. Now, your dad, was he grooming you? I mean, you're the oldest, you're the boy. Son, you're going to follow in the
he's got a blue collar thing. He's got a blue collar thing kind of lined out, and you could make a good life out of a blue collar job in Detroit at that time. You get good security, benefits, cottage up north, the boat, whatever.
Yeah, American dream.
So, the American dream. So that was available, but I'd worked in that screw machine shop, and I didn't like it.
Yep.
And I was drawn to the music, and I had that wanderlust. I needed to find out for myself. People were saying, "Oh, you can't do that. This is the way it is," Larry. And I'm like, "You're watching television, and you're going to tell me this is the way it is."
Yeah.
How do you know?
Right.
So I was that kind of guy. I had to go find out for myself.
Was that tough for him?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When Wayne Kramer offered me, said, "Come and work for us. We need another guy. We're going to New York, and we need another roadie." And I said, "Hey, Dad, I'm moving to Ann Arbor. I'm going to go work for the MC5." And he said, "You walk out that door, don't come back." And I said, "I'll see you later."
It must have been, looking back at that generation, you got to almost feel bad for those fuckers, right? I mean, so many kids, so many of your peers and contemporaries just, must have driven their parents bananas.
Yeah, I agree. I look back at it and say, what the hell was that like for them?
Yeah.
What if I put myself in his shoes today?
Yeah.
That's my kid. And he can't get me on the phone. He doesn't know where. We didn't have the communications you have today. Sure. I'm just gone. So, it wasn't I didn't get a lot of support when I left.
I bet.
It was, don't come back.
Yeah. Wow. So how did that thing with Wayne sort of start? I mean, 65 to like 67-ish, you're cutting your teeth in Detroit, doing shows, working for Shagmore, Fruit of the Loom.
Yeah, I'm working for Fruit of the Loom.
You're just thinking, I just like this music thing. I got a car, I can hang out. These guys are cool.
Yeah, there was a good club scene in Detroit. We had Crow's Nest, we had the Pumpkin, Crow's Nest East, Crow's Nest West, the Grandy, and there was just this thriving Silver Bell Hideout. The Hideout, there was a thriving scene in Birmingham Teen Center. So the Fruit of the Loom I was working for, Mike Quattro was our agent, and we did gigs with the MC5. So I got to know Wayne and the band by virtue of just being at those gigs together. And like I say, he approached me in 68. I was 17 years old, and it was like, hey, we need a guy. And I just got out of high school, and I was ready to go.
What did they? What were the requirements? What did you have to do?
I drove the truck, loaded, load the gear, unload the gear, set up the practice room when we got home. And that was one of my favorite times, was being at the practice room working on the songs. That was the enjoyable part. The gigs were fun, but I really enjoyed the time in the practice room, seeing them work on the music. But my job, the truck, I took care of the truck, took it in for service, took the amps in. I had a guy in Detroit named Smitty who was the best Marshall technician in the world. And when bands came through Detroit, they would go see Smitty to get their Marshalls worked on. I had accounts at the music stores, and I maintained those accounts. I made sure they got paid.
How much did you get paid? You remember?
I can tell you with Alice Cooper, I was getting $50 a week with the MC5.
$50 a week?
Yeah.
$50 a week in 1971.
Yeah, $50.
Well, you figure a Coke was probably 25 cents, 71, maybe less.
Yeah, it wasn't enough. I can tell you that, Larry. It just wasn't enough. $50. Working for the MC5. Week. Yeah, $50 a week. With the MC5, I had a golf credit card for gas, and a lot of times I got food with that credit card so I could eat. There wasn't like a per diem or anything formal along in those lines at the time.
Yeah.
A lot of brown rice at the house. We all lived in the commune there at 1510 Hill Street. And that was one thing at that point in time. Bands lived together. The road crew was part of the band. I noticed the Allman Brothers. They said they were that denoted that they were brothers, and that included the road crew and everybody that was associated with the band in that house down in Georgia. Yeah. And that was the same thing at Hill Street. We had the girls there. They made the clothes. The Roadies. We were all part of that. We were brothers. We call each other brother. So it was a different time. So money wasn't the prime consideration.
Right.
It really was about just making it happen. Like you said, these were happenings.
Right.
And that's what motivated us. And it was nice to get some cash.
Sure.
But I was young and I didn't need much.
Right. You're 18 years old.
Yeah.
And you're living in a house with a bunch of dudes and women.
Yeah.
And drugs.
And the drugs are flowing.
And music and women and all that stuff. And you're right. What do you need,
Yeah. As a naive 18-year-old, living this dream.
Yeah.
And it was all good at that point.
This was also a big time for them in the political stuff, right? Sinclair and all that stuff going on. What was that like?
That was going on. My focus was the music and the political side, the White Panthers and that. I saw the Black Panthers come in the house and visit and hear the beating on the table and the arguments, the political arguments, but I wasn't part of that. And I got it, and I was against the war and all of that. I didn't get drafted. I got called up, but
how'd you miss that?
I came up 334 alphabetically in the lottery.
Yeah.
And I never got called. I had to appear for my physical before I graduated from high school. I went down to Fort Wayne in Detroit, took my physical, and then just waited. And
shit, man.
And it didn't get. I was fortunate that I didn't get drafted.
That's amazing. It's amazing just to think like how many guys did get drafted.
All my buddies, they were gone.
Wow.
They all went. You know, they were over there, and I had no issues with what they did when they came home. I treated them just like I did before they went in the military. You know, it wasn't like, oh, you guys fought this war, blah, blah, blah. That's not how it was for me. Those were my buds.
Yeah, and thank God they came home.
Yeah, I was glad to see them. And, you know, that's just the way it was for me.
Yeah.
But I wasn't a real politically involved, you know, because it took away from the music. And, you know, the Five paid a price for that political involvement, you know, and it cost them dearly when we did the Boston Tea Party gig and the motherfucker showed up. And then we did the Fillmore East and the motherfucker showed up. And at that time, Bill Graham put the word out that these guys were trouble. And it really, really affected the MC5's ability to get into big rooms and tour. You know, and get to that proverbial next level.
Right.
And they were poised, you know, the machinery was in place to do that. And it really hurt.
Yeah.
Really hurt them, you know.
Yep. And so as the Stooges start to emerge, do you remember those were you around for those early-ish days when the Stooges started to hang around and everything? And
I wasn't.
They considered the MC5 like big brothers, yeah?
Yeah, there was that whole thing. They said, you know, the MC5 was like the big brother band. I wasn't there when the signing took place. I came on shortly after, and we hung out together. You know, they were friends. Scotty Ashton, the drummer, was friends with Dennis Thompson. And, you know, we would run over there and hang out with the Stooges, the guys on the road crew. You know, one thing, the Roadies always had the dope. You know, we always had the weed or the hash. Right. So you're always welcome. You know, I'd go over to the Stooges. Yeah, you know, Bealo, he's got the good hash, you know, so, hey, come on over. And, you know, that when you weren't on the road, what did you do? You'd practice. You'd get stoned, you know, hang out with your buds.
Yep.
You know, we'd read comic books or hang out with girls. And we were young guys, you know, doing what young guys do.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we were hanging out and knew each other. And there was a mutual respect between the Five and the Stooges. You know, they were like-minded.
Yep.
In that regard, they were pushing the envelope.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And so, what sort of led to you hopping over to the Stooges?
It was during the recording of the second album back in the USA. John had gone to prison, and John Landau had come into Detroit to advise and produce that album, back in the USA. And they brought in an accountant, and they moved to Hamburg. They left Hill Street, and everything was changing. They were going to set up more of a business operation. But for me, the deal breaker was in the studio. John Landau just treated us as non-entities. The road crew in that we didn't have any place in what was going on, and I felt like he'd cut their balls off, you know, what I was hearing in the studio. And I said, I can't do this.
How? You know? What was different prior to that? You know, if he felt like, or you felt like he thought you didn't have any place in the studio, what was different prior to that? What would be your role in the studio? More just hanging out and you're just part of it?
I was just part of it.
Yeah.
You know, it was like, okay, what do you need, Wayne? What kind of amp do you need? What do you think I should use, Leo? You know, there was that kind of exchange taking place.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I'll go over to Gus Soppy. We'll try one. We'll try this. We'll try that. We'll see. You know, I saw a new fuzz tone. I saw this wah-wah. We'll see what it does. You know, those type of things. And when Landau came in, it was really like the door was closed. You guys don't belong in here. And it was like, okay. I didn't feel like he belonged in there, you know, at the end of the day.
Yeah.
It was like, you know, we got this, you know, East Coast, you know, guy with slacks and a you know, a sport coat. And it's like, what the fuck?
Right.
You know, I'm not, what the fuck is this guy doing?
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, and he has achieved a high level of success in the industry.
It's amazing.
Granted.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But at that point in time, that was my take,
Sure.
You know, and it was like, oh, come on. So I went over to, you know, Scotty Ashton and said, hey, why don't you come and work for us? You know, we're getting more gigs. And, you know, so I moved over to the Stooge Hall and,
was that weird?
No,
or were people sort of doing that at that time in those bands?
Yeah. things were in a state of flux.
Yeah.
With the Five and the Stooges, you know, they were still on good terms. There were other bands like SRC had a road crew, and yeah, that was starting to happen. Guys that were part of the crews. You know, ultimately Zeke came over and worked with me with the Stooges. He left the SRC. He wasn't happy there anymore. Yeah. And Zeke was really a highly skilled electronics tech, and he could do it. Yeah. You know, I went to his house and he had built his own amp, and he had a sound system that would just blow the doors off the apartment. You know, and I was like, he was a couple years older than me, and back then, when you were 19 and somebody was 22 or 23, they were a lot older.
Oh yeah, they're an old man.
yeah. So I really, you know, Zeke was that guy for me.
Yeah. That's super cool.
Could show me. Yeah, he knew his stuff. Him and Kurt Andrews worked for the SRC, and they ended up. Kurt had his own sound company for years out of Ann Arbor, but. Like I say, with the MC5, that Back in the USA album, John Landau came on the scene. They moved to Hamburg, and you know they got cars, and that was all well and good. I wanted them to achieve success, but I did not like what was going on in the recording studio, and I just said I got to get out of here. Yeah, you know, and I loved the energy of the Stooges, Ron Ashton as a guitar player. That sound. Yeah, you know, I wanted to be part of that sound, and. You know, when I worked for the Fruit of the Loom, they had custom guitar amps. And I had read in a magazine about Marshall amplifiers over in England. And I went to Gus Zoppe Music in Detroit, Larry. And Gus had Marshall 100-watt lead stack sitting there and a Marshall Major 200-watt bass stack. I traded in those custom amps and brought those back to the practice room for the Fruit. And Norm Lieberman was the lead singer and ran the show. And he was like, where's my customs? You know, where's my amps? And I said, those are junk. This is what you need. And the guitar player and the bass player, they love that stuff, Larry. But we had some of the first Marshalls in Detroit, you know, because I just saw that, those got to be the right thing, you know, at that moment. I was not, and I had the account there, and Gus and I, he was a young guy, and he trusted me because I made sure he got his money. Right. And that wasn't always the case when it came to bands, you know. Sure.
I can imagine. So 1970 with the Stooges. Yeah. Give me some only 1 year with those guys, really.
Yeah, it was like late 69. I left the MC5 and I moved over to the Stooge house, and we were going out to LA to do the Funhouse album. And Zeke came over from SRC. And we drove a U-Haul out to Electra Studios in Los Angeles. We were staying at the Tropicana Motel just off of Sunset. Yep. And recording over at Electra Studios. And we're sharing the studio with Love at the time. And we had Brian Ross Mehring was the engineer. And he had just finished up with Simon and Garfunkel. Wow. And he was losing his mind recording the Stooges. He didn't know what the hell was going on.
Yeah, you go from some acoustic guitars and strings, I guess, to
Bridge Over Troubled Waters.
Right. Little did he know that bridge was going to extend a little further.
Yeah. Holy shit. he was losing his mind, but he did a great job. And there was Don Gallucci was in there. He had done the Kingsman Louie. Wow. And so he was a producer. So the Stooges brought him in. Yeah, because of that credibility, that gave him some credibility. Was that Louis?
I imagine from 68 to 69 with the MC5, you had toured the country.
Yeah.
So you'd been out to LA at that point?
Yeah, I'd been to LA with the first MC5 tour. We went up to Seattle. We did the Eagles Auditorium with Jethro Tull. And it was the first time we saw Jethro Tull, and we were like, what the hell is he doing, you know? It was just different, you know.
Yeah.
Playing the flute, standing on one leg, we were like, oh, okay. and the Seattle crowd didn't get it, though. They were throwing apples and stuff at the MC5. It took them a long time to catch on. It took them until the 90s where they finally, in my mind, to where they caught up. But, the 5 didn't fly in Seattle. And then we went down to San Francisco, and we did the Speedway Meadows Golden Gate Park gig in the afternoon, and that was a great gig. Yeah, a lot of fun. The 5 did Shaking All Over, and the crowd lost their mind when they did that, you know. And the 5 just had a power
Yeah.
Live that was beyond anything anybody had experienced. And, that was, San Francisco, it was peace, love. And here come Detroit, with a 426 Hemi attitude,
Yeah.
coming into L.A. And these guys are kicking back, and it was.
But where I'm going is, so when was the recording of the Stooges record in L.A.? 69?
That was in 1970, in the spring of 1970. So, I got to L.A. with the MC5. And then, like I say, with the Stooges, we got out there. Zeke and I hauled the equipment out in the truck. Sandy Koufax, Tropicana Motel, Electra Studios. But
you're making a record, so now you've got some time. So I guess where I'm going, man, is so 20 years old, 1970 L.A.
Yeah. I hadn't even turned 20. I was 19 when I got there. I turned 20 in July.
How was that?
It was great.
Yeah, so you turned 20 in L.A.?
Just after I got back to Detroit. We got back here.
Okay, I was pushing for like a good L.A. birthday party.
No, didn't make it.
Made it back to Detroit. I'm sure you had plenty of good parties.
Oh, it was good times. The hotel, you had the restaurant there in the front. And the one morning I went down for breakfast, and Jim Morrison was sitting there having some breakfast, a muffin and a coffee, and he looked like he had been rode hard and put up wet that particular morning.
Yeah.
And I didn't talk to him. I just looked over and went, "Oh, Jim Morrison, what do you say?"
Right.
And I just always gave what do you say, And I met a girl.
Like the pants, Jim.
yeah, nice pants. But I met a girl, she was an aspiring starlet, and we hung out and had a good time,
Yeah.
And that's just the way it was back then. You would meet a girl and it'd be on, and when it was done, it was done, and there was no, you just knew it was not going to be any long term.
No video to prove it.
No,
Yeah.
But it's that's what I was living for at the time. That was the rock and roll. Yeah. It was sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And we were just out there doing what we do, and making it happen. And Zeke and I, we were renting equipment from Studio Instrument Rentals and bringing it in. And it was live in the studio, that was recorded live in the studio. So it really, if you listen to that album, you'll hear Iggy coughing and yelling at the band at different points in time because it's happening in real time.
Right.
And that was kind of new for Brian, the engineer, that we were going to do this. Ron had his Marshall refrigerator, 610-inch, 50-watt Marshall cabinet in the studio. No, that's my amp. That It wasn't like, we'll get a Fender Twin, and no, this is my setup, and so you were hearing Ron Ashton in all his glory.
Wow.
On that,
Yeah.
So
that's tremendous. So that was a year.
Yeah, that was a year. Everything happened in real short time frames, at that time. And we came back to Detroit and did the Goose Lake Festival, and that's where Dave Alexander crashed and burned, and he ended up, leaving the band or being removed from the band.
Yeah.
Zeke took over on bass for a little bit.
What were some of what was the feeling, with all these hardcore drugs starting to come in? I mean, as we've said, you're living for the now.
Yes. But
you're
for
all
me,
young, right? I mean, you're not going to tell Iggy or Dave or whoever, "Hey man, let's slow it down," right?
Yeah,
that would be uncool.
Yeah, you need to dial it back. I will tell you, I took Scotty Ashton's works and flushed him down the toilet one day at the Stooge house, and he went fucking ballistic.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I was just like, I could see it coming apart. And I just didn't want to see that because I knew what the record company had done, what Danny Fields had done, and things were in place. And we got back to Ann Arbor, and the hard drugs came on. And I stay to this day, I didn't sign up for that, Larry. I did not sign up for the hard drugs.
Yeah, why did you stay away from the hard drugs?
I saw what it did. It took away from the energy in the, and you can sit there and say, oh yeah, my creativity is thriving now. Because I'm doing heroin. It's bullshit.
Yeah.
You end up laying in the corner with your, in nodding, and that's just what I saw.
Yeah.
And I saw, Zeke died a year later from a heroin overdose, and I just saw the toll that it was taking.
Yeah.
At that point.
Now, someone like Zeke, I mean, this guy's your bro. He's right, and you could talk to that guy more. I'm guessing maybe more directly than you could talk to one of the artists, right?
Yes.
This is your guy. You're in a fucking U-Haul with for 9 billion hours.
He's my bud.
Yeah. And you're watching him go down this road also. What led him down the road?
He wanted to be one of the guys. Everybody wants to fit in somewhere, Larry, especially when you're young. You're looking for that place to fit in. Yep. And Zeke was really just susceptible to that. I think I just had a little more, I don't know what it is that kept me from going down that path, but I fought it. I sampled it, and I was like, no, I can't, this is not where I'm going. Yeah. Yep. I want to go out there and make this happen, and if I'm doing the heroin, I'm not going to be that guy. Yeah. So for me, there was no glamour. There was no attraction to it. Yep. And yeah. So, but there was no talking to those guys. Right. They were going to do what they were going to do. Yep.
And I imagine if you got in the way, you get fired.
Yeah, you got fired, or you were just on the outs, and they brought in, I had a friend who came back from Vietnam. He did 2 tours. He was strung out on heroin. His girlfriend was a big-time heroin dealer in Detroit. So Bernie becomes a friend of the Stooges because he's got the access. Right. And, Scotty Ashton ran the truck under the bridge in Ann Arbor and tore the cat, on the way to the gig. They hit a low bridge. Yeah. And it was Bernie and Scott Ashton. And they were on a dope run before the gig. They were late for the gig and ended up, tearing up the truck. And, Jesus. But that's what happened. The guys with the hard drugs came in. Yeah. And the Detroit music scene in general was transformed in a negative Yeah. It just took its toll.
Not to go too far down this little rabbit hole, but in terms of the sort of the decline of that golden Detroit industrial era. Was that also happening around the same time? Or was that later?
That was later.
Okay. It just seems like Detroit's like fucking hard, hard town.
Yeah, it was like the big three. The Japanese came in with the Toyota and the small cars, and the big three said, "Oh, those are junk. We got an answer to that." And they come up with the Vega and the Pinto, right. and they were junk. Yeah. Okay, they were junk. Yep. And so Detroit was the auto industry was a little too full of themselves, and between that and the UAW and the upper management, to me, they killed the golden goose. Yep. They killed the golden goose. Yeah. The riots in '67 were part of that. When the riots took place, that was the start. Because the white migration out of the city, the auto industry abandoned the city, and then you had this decline just up until several years ago was still going. Yeah.
Were you at the was it 72? Hang on, where'd it go? Yeah, the 72 show at the ballroom with MC5.
At the Grandy Ball, the final show? Yeah. No, I wasn't there that night. I talked to some people that were. Yeah. And they said it was a sad night. Yeah. That's one friend said he had to leave. He said he just had to leave.
Yeah. That's what I was asking, because what I read about is like they used to pack that place, and then they had literally a dozen people there.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's crazy. I mean, it must be wild. It must have been wild. Again, at that point, you probably don't have the years behind you to have the perspective, but to be in it, but also on the periphery to watch the shifting sands, right?
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. And the Grandy lot, was replaced by the East Town. It was a bigger venue, and the bands were playing over at the East Town. But the East Town was full of Quaaludes and, downers, and it was a different crowd, and it was a different era already.
Right.
Was starting.
Right, which is what, 71, 72?
Yeah, 71, 72, and it was just like Humble Pie would come in there and just tear it up. And bands love coming to Detroit because it's party time, man.
Yeah.
It was always fucking party time. What's
the famous hotel there? Is that the one I'm thinking? Oh no, in Cleveland. But there must be a place in Detroit that was like sort of like the Riot House.
There was the Pontchartrain was one of the hotels. There were parties at the Garwood Mansion. That was the place to be after the gig. Mm-hmm. You go over there, and Eric Clapton went there and played the night of his birthday after they played in Detroit. Mm-hmm. So there were those places that, after hours where you would go.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was always something.
How'd you bounce from the Stooges to Alice Cooper?
My buddy Martin Priest, who had been the drummer in the Fruit of the Loom, Martin was a genius, just a genius guy. And he went over he got out of playing drums, and he went over to Alice Cooper, and he was roadie, building equipment. He loved Alice. And he said, "Hey, you want to come and work with me with Alice?" I said, "Sure. I need something to do,
Yeah.
And I went over there, and that was $50 a week. And Shep Gordon was the manager at that time. And Martin and I we built a snake for the sound system to put the board out front. That was revolutionary at that time. Mm-hmm. Nobody had that snake and that board out in front, and he put that together. I can remember sitting up in an apartment in Pontiac soldering those pairs together, and we were just kids,
Yeah.
And we were making it happen. We built the electric chair out of 2x4s and flashers. You'd put the porcelain sockets, and you'd put the flasher down in there and put the bulb in. I mean, it was just simple stuff. Train transformers with nichrome wire to light off the smoke bombs, And that's what we worked with. And now today it's all computer controlled. They got IP addresses. Right. This guy's telling me, I meet this guy, and he's going, "Yeah, Leo, I know my speaker. I can isolate on it by the IP address." And I'm going, "That's crazy."
Yeah.
But it's just way beyond.
Right.
The technology today is, here we are talking and seeing each other.
Crazy, right?
Dick Tracy and the wristwatch radio. Yeah.
Exactly.
I'm living in the future, Larry, and I'm into bonus today. I didn't think I was going to make it this far.
Yeah.
I thought if I made 25 the way I was living at that particular time in my life, 25 was going to be it. And,
it's a long way from soupy sales, huh?
Yeah. You got that right. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh man. So Alice was, let me ask you this. Do you remember thinking around this time, and we're in the Cooper time. Mm-hmm. You've got several years under your belt of doing this stuff. So 71, you're 21 years old. Jesus.
Yeah.
It's crazy, man. Do you remember having a sense of, I want to, stay in this to do X, Y, and Z, or this is where I could go with this, or maybe not. Maybe it was, I just hope I make it another 4 more years.
With Cooper, 18 was released, and it was getting airplay. I was working with him at that point, but there was nothing for Martin and I. There was no money. There was no reward for us.
Yep.
And we were busting our ass. We had a 24-foot U-Haul packed to the gills. It was a massive setup, and it was Martin and I, and then there was Charlie who did lights, but all Charlie did was show up and push the little keys.
Right.
Yeah. We did the bulwark, and they were achieving some success. But we weren't going to be part of that. We were not going to be financially rewarded. I was like, okay. And I don't know. I have a way of looking at situations and going, fuck this. I'm out of here. I just come to that point where I see it for what it is.
Yeah.
And there was nothing to be had. Shep Gordon wasn't going to give us any money.
Yep.
He wasn't going to buy us a car so we could get around. We're driving the truck, and then we're getting bitched at because we're putting miles on the truck,
Right.
We got to go to the music store. Come on. So it was frustrating and I had to go.
Yeah.
And I had a friend in New York. She had moved to New York, and I got the call to go work at Chrysalis. And I felt like, okay, now I got a shot at some stability and the money was good, and it was a good organization, but there still was no long-term opportunity there.
What were you going to do at Chrysalis?
I was road managing.
Okay.
I was
so like a
road
staff
managing.
guy, road managing.
Road managing, roadie. I was setting up. They sent a guy over from England, and he was the tour manager. And I would set up and handle the equipment, and he handled the contract and the paperwork. So it was just the two of us.
Were they a label at that point?
Chrysalis was a label.
Okay.
They had an office in L.A.
Yep.
And Derek Sutton was in New York and ran the New York office. And when the band said they had Yes, Procul Harum, and some other acts to follow. But initially I was going to go on a tour with Yes. And then at the last minute they said, no, we're going to put you out with Procul Harum. And I really enjoyed that. Yeah. They were class act.
So you were more of like a staff roadie guy for them.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Yep, I did 2 tours with Procul Harum, and then Robin Trower. I did 2 tours with Robin through Chrysalis, and back to Detroit though at the end of the tours, waiting for the next gig. Yeah. Okay, Larry. So there still was not a continuity where I could make a living.
Right.
And I'm at that age now where I need to make a living.
Yep. Yep.
I'm not a teenager, and I need to make a living. I want to have my own car.
Right. Right. You're 23. You're almost 20. It's amazing. We've been talking for an hour, right? We've just covered more ground in those 5 years or whatever than like most people get in a lifetime. And and at 23, like, I got to pull it together.
Yeah. And in the meantime, I went over to McLaren Engines in Livonia, Michigan, and worked on the Can-Am team for the season as a gopher. Wow. To fill in between tours, which was exhilarating, man. It was a great environment, Yeah. So, I lived a lot in that short period of time. When I look at it, when I start doing the PowerPoints and things and breaking it down, and I'm like, holy shit. And people will go, I met a guy from Detroit, and he was on the rock scene over the years. He was like a hanger-on guy. And I met him several years ago in a bar, and I was introduced to him, and he goes, my friend says, hey, I want you to meet Leo Beattie. He worked for the Stooges and the Five, and he looked at me and goes, oh, you're too young to have worked for those guys. And I said, hey, fuck you. You don't know who I am, because I know him.
I like you, man. No bullshit, dude. I like you a lot.
And he, because I know him. I know who he is because he's that guy who has to be known.
Right.
And I was that guy that wasn't known, but just because you don't. Yeah, but I was there.
Yeah.
And my brother had a band, and he had a song about, you don't know me, but, that don't mean shit.
Right.
Because you just don't know who I am.
Right.
So I really identified with my brother's song.
Yeah.
But I never forget that night, because he's like, yeah, well, you were too young. You never did that. And I'm like, oh, no.
Anybody else? You got 11. There's 11 of you kids. Any of the other 10 get into music or anything?
My brother Daryl is a year younger than I. I was born July 14th. He was born July 20th in 1951. Okay. And he played guitar. He took lessons at Honolulu Conservatory of Music in Mount Clemens, and he stayed with it. And he had bands over the years, and they played on the punk scene a lot in Detroit. And they were one of the wind it up and go. It's like you wind a rubber band up as tight as it'll go, and then let it go, and they just rip.
Yeah.
And my youngest brother is a twin. My brother David, he was a drummer, and he is a machine.
Is he?
This guy, he can play the drums. And They played around town. They played bookies and in the clubs, and there was a whole other scene underneath the top tier in Detroit. And there were a lot of good bands that just played around town and in hall parties, basements. That whole scene was percolating, and these guys were as good as anybody else. They just weren't, they were going to work in the morning and then doing these things at night.
Yeah.
He had a farm for a while. They had a chicken coop with the egg crates on the wall. And it was just, it was always a place to hang out. When I came in off the road, I could always go to my brother's and hang, and that was nice. There were some, and a lot of bands back in that 60s, late 60s, 70s, the bands had farms. They get these farmhouses where nobody paid any attention to them.
Yeah.
Practice room out back. Nobody heard the noise. And those were good times. That was a good era,
I bet, man, for sure.
Yeah.
Did you,
all over.
When did you reconcile with your dad?
Probably
2000.
Yeah, it was much later, and gradually over time, I came in off the road, and I went to work as a diesel mechanic. And he always used to say to me when I'd come in a town, he'd go, "When are you going to get a real job?" That was his thing. I would be like,
not a good way to start.
Yeah, it's like this is my real job. In my mind, this is a real job. But I did, started out in the diesel business, and as time went on, I got married, had a family, and he started to see me in a different light. And then I became to appreciate him as time went on. And towards the end of his life, I took him down to the VA and got him his benefits and what was due him. He had 2 Bronze Stars, 2 Purple Hearts, and he was the real deal.
Wow.
As far as a World War II vet, but he wasn't getting all the benefits that he should be getting. So I walked him through that, and we became more than father and son. It just changed the whole relationship. So I was really glad that at the end there, I was able to just walk him through and give it to him instead of him giving it to me. We'd be walking into the VA, and I'd look back and go, "Come on, today, Dad," and he'd just glare at me. But it was cool, Wow. It had come full circle there,
Yeah.
And part of that, and I just got to mention this briefly, part of that is due to the fact that at the age of 50, I went into recovery and changed a lot about the way I lived, because some of that carried over from the rock and roll, and it wasn't doing me any good anymore. It wasn't it was counterproductive to my core values that I aspired to. So it took me a while, but that's when at the age of 50, I cleaned it up completely and
good for
got
you.
a whole new outlook on life.
Congratulations, man.
Yeah. So when I say I'm in the bonus, I'm deep in the bonus, man.
Yeah. Yeah. So
yeah.
So just to start bringing it home, you popped after Chrysalis. You got a gig with Mitch Ryder in '73.
Yep, I came back. I was in Detroit, and I was looking for another gig. I was working. It doesn't show up in there, but I was working at the Rainbow Room at the Fort Shelby in Detroit. There was John Sinclair, and there was a couple of guys out of Southfield. We had this room, the Rainbow Room, in the Shelby Hotel in Detroit, which was a legendary room from the 30s. We were doing things in there with jazz in Detroit, with rock bands. And the B came through there, Johnny B, and we got to talking, and he's like, "Hey, Leo, we need a tour manager. We need a guy to go out on the road." So I said, "Okay, I'm good to go," because I wasn't digging running the room. It just wasn't me.
Right.
And the 2 guys that owned it and ran it, the father and son, they were nasty guys, and I was like, "Nah, I'm out."
Yep.
So I went on the road with Mitch Ryder in Detroit, or Detroit with Mitch Ryder was the name of the band. We called it Detroit, and that band was phenomenal. They had a live show to equal to anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Steve Hunter, Brett Tuggle, Johnny B on drums. They rocked, man. Ron Cook on bass, and Harry Phillips, Hairless on Hammond B3 organ. That was a band.
Wow.
They were like the Leonard Skinner of Detroit.
Right.
They were on that level of rocking. And it was a treat. But that's where I finished up. And, we were riding around in vans and staying down in the bayou down south. We did some gigs that were just crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy stuff. Cops sitting outside the room while we're playing pinochle all night watching us. And, it was just it was interesting.
And so was there a moment? Was there a thing that you were like, "Okay, I'm out"?
It was like I just had this thought.
or that tour ended, you got back to Detroit and you're like, let's go. I can't do this.
Yeah, it was like, what else is there to do here? There was no band that I looked at and admired, it felt inspired by. They didn't move me. And the music business was really, for me, was turning into a business. It's like in the Grandy movie, Roger Daltrey said in the beginning, the accountants and the lawyers hadn't caught up with us yet. And it was that moment, kind of like the accountants and the lawyers had finally caught up, and I didn't want any part of it. You know, and there was no band that moved me, and it was just time to move on. And I had this picture of myself at 50 years old with a van out in front of some bar with a cigarette hanging out of my mouth, you know, unloading the equipment. And I was like, nah, I don't love it that much, you know?
Yep.
That was it for me. I'm still involved. You know, I volunteer. I did the Grandy Ballroom gig. I did the Dick Wagner Remember the Children. I helped out on that. And so there's things that I do, and I still support the music community here in Detroit. And it's interesting to show up and meet some young musicians or a band or, you know, whoever backstage and go, oh, yeah, I work for the Five and that. And they're like, oh, really, man? You got to have some stories. And it's fun, but it's not so much about telling my story. I just try to encourage them and let them know how much I appreciate what they're doing because I hear some of these bands and these guys and they're just excellent. My nephews have all had bands. My one nephew has a band right now and he plays all over the city. So it's cool to see.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm still going out to the clubs and hanging out and, you know, enjoying it.
That's awesome,
you know?
man.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Now I'm going to hit this one page because you put it here.
Okay.
Me and my girl.
Yeah. I felt like I needed to bring Diane into the light at this point in my life. We met at the Grandy Ballroom and we hung out for a minute and we didn't have a lot of baggage. And we reconnected here 6 years ago on the Friends of the Grandy Ballroom Facebook webpage. And I saw her name. She was in Arizona. I'm in Detroit. I sent her a message, and I said, hey, Diane, it's Leo. Do you remember me? Your dad was a Detroit cop. And I knew that would tell her that I was who I was. And she came back, and she was coy. But we established communication. And come to find out, you know, she worked at Chrysalis Records in L.A. She left Detroit in 1970 and went out there. And I was working out at Chrysalis in New York, but we didn't know where either one of us was. Wow. So, and then she moved to New York in early 80s and worked at MTV when MTV launched. And then she worked at Lincoln Center and then eventually back out west to Phoenix. And that's where I found her on that Friends of the Grandy page. And we talked, and then we Skyped, and then she flew in and visited me, and we struck up the relationship, and we've been together for the last 6 years, and we still love music, and we're just
crazy.
Yeah. We went to the Grandy Ballroom reunion, and it felt so good. It felt so right. And, you know, they had bands with members from the original bands that played the Grandy, the Jagged Edge, and, you know, Steve Farmer from the Amboy Dukes was there, and you're seeing these guys, and it's like, wow. You know, and Diane was part of that. She worked at the Grandy at the soda counter. They sold incense and pop and chips in the Grandy. And to have her in my life today is just like a treat, you know.
Wow.
And yeah. And,
I read the page about the Grandy also, and I was like, man, I want to go see that place.
Yeah, you know, it's have you seen the movie Louder Than Love?
No.
Tony D'Annunzio. And anybody that's listening, if you've heard about the Grandy Ballroom and you want to know what it felt like, see the movie Louder Than Love, and you will be transported to the Grandy. Okay. I just know that when I would walk up the steps into the Grandy, and I'll never forget this one night they were playing Brave Tales of Ulysses on the house PA, and I had not heard that song. And it just blew me away, you know, and you'd smell the incense and the pot. And when you walked in there, it was just mystical. It was like nothing else I've experienced in my life. So the Grandy was a special place for us in Detroit. And Tony D'Annunzio captures it in that Louder Than Love. It's excellent. So check that out.
Okay.
And a plug for myself. I have a video on YouTube called U-Hauls to Hell.
That's right. That's right. U-Hauls to Hell.
U-Hauls to Hell. And it's myself, Corky, and Tim Belo. And these were my sidekicks, and they were on the road with me with the MC5. And then Corky was with me with Detroit, and we've known each other since high school. And we just did a deal in the record store telling stories, and there's some good stuff in there. And we enjoyed ourselves, you know. We had a real good time. But we want to make a movie, U-Hauls to Hell. So if anybody wants to make the Roadie movie, U-Hauls to Hell, get in touch with me.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Now, wait, just for those people listening.
Yeah.
So when you split out of the music business, just give us briefly what your second act was.
When I left the music business, I had a couple friends from high school that were working at Saunders Leasing System, and they got me in over there part-time washing trucks. And I started washing trucks part-time. I got into a correspondence course, diesel mechanic, fuel injection, heavy truck repair, and I got hired in full-time as a trainee. Then I became a serviceman, then a B mechanic, A mechanic, diesel mechanic. I went to Jartran Truck Rental as a region service manager. They went bankrupt, and I ended up at Detroit Diesel, which was owned by Roger Penske. And what's the interesting part was I used to work at Saunders Leasing and look across Telegraph at the Detroit Diesel plant, Larry, and go, gee, I wonder what goes on over there. And when I worked at McLaren, I used to look over at Team Penske. We raced against him, and I go, yeah, I'd like to work for him someday. So it ends up 25 years later, I'm working at Detroit Diesel, or 20 years later, I end up working at Detroit Diesel. Roger Penske owns the company. So I wanted to work for Roger. I wondered what went on at Detroit Diesel, and that's where I ended up. And I spent 25 years there as an engineering technician and as a product trainer. And I traveled, over to England, the Panama Canal Zone, all over the United States. And it was a great career because they kept me occupied.
Yeah.
And I still got to travel. And it was just it's been a great run.
And you just recently retired.
I retired 4 years ago.
4 years ago. Okay.
Yeah. And I got a little boat on the canal here, and I walleye fish, and I play with my grandkids.
Nice.
Yeah. My grandson plays guitar and drums, and he loves Hendrix. We're going to see Experience Hendrix in March.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even look that thing up. Is that tour coming around?
Yeah. Yeah, Experience Hendrix is coming.
I've never seen that. I gotta go see.
Neither have I. I said, I gotta go. And this will be his first real concert.
Oh.
And I always had to tell him, Jimmy's not going to be there,
right?
Because he's still. It's like,
how old is he?
11.
Oh, God.
But he's still like not quite, cognizant.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But he really likes Jimmy, and he's a big fan of Jack White. He just really grabbed on to Jack White. So he said, when are we going to see him? I said, soon.
Yeah.
So I got to. He's my sidekick. Yeah. He's been to Third Man Records. We've been down there, and yeah, he's my bud.
That's awesome. And it's got to be so cool for him to have you with the wealth of experience, because you can walk him into a guitar store and be like, you want this fucking sound? I'll show you how to get this sound.
Yeah, I got some used stuff in the room here. And he goes in there and plugs in the guitar, and he works, he's making sound, So go play, man. I just say, go play.
Right.
Enjoy it.
Right.
Yep. See what comes out of you.
And Diane, what's she doing these days?
Diane is retired and just hanging out, growing her herb garden and taking care of herself. And I have to tell you, she was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer 4 years ago, and she's still in that battle.
Oh,
but she's goes through it with such grace and strength that it's amazing. She's an amazing woman, and she just keeps plugging along.
Wow.
And she's made me a better man, and I couldn't ask for anything more at this point in my life.
Leo, this has been fantastic. What a way to bring 2018 slowly to a close, to have this great chat with you and look back on this time and get your perspective and thoughts, man, and your story. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you, Larry, and the fact that you approach it from that human standpoint. I noticed that in your in your show.
Yeah.
And it wasn't all about the amps and the guitars and all the debauchery backstage, in spite of the fact that all that did go on.
Yeah.
But
I appreciate that.
Yeah, but no, you really come at it from a human standpoint. I appreciate that.
Thank you, man. It's funny because people ask about the show and talking, don't you want to talk to artists? Yeah, I want to talk to artists, but I also make it clear to folks like you, that doing the show, when I do like a pre-call or whatever it is with somebody, I make sure to say, look, I'm not interested. Cause sometimes people are a little like, I don't know if I should do this. I said, listen, I don't want to know how much coke Eddie Van Halen did,
Yeah.
I know this. I mean, do I want to sit down and hear about all the crazy stories? Absolutely. Who wouldn't? I'm a fan of music and all this kind of stuff. And, I've got 9 guitars behind me. I want to hear all about it. But you know what? That's already out there in the world. There's people that do that kind of show much better. And flip side, there's people that do the technical shit much better than I do. I don't know a lot of this stuff. I got guitars, a few pedals, plug it in, sounds great. I've played in a few bands. Awesome. If I start talking to, Dave Natal about frequencies and compressors, he's going to know I sound like a dick. And I don't, to me, it's this, and it's more, I'm just fascinated about how people get in, why they get in, and the journey and, and all that stuff. So I thank you for recognizing that and being a part of it, man.
Yes. Thank you, Larry.
You got it.
It's been a pleasure.
Happy New Year to you.
Yep. Happy New Year. Merry Christmas, everybody. And I hope you get what you want for Christmas.
And a special shout out to Diane for keeping you on the straight and narrow, and you for her, and Happy New Year to you both, man. I wish you all the best. If you ever come east, let me know.
I will. I'm going to come and see Bob, Night Bob, and want to include you in that visit. So
that would be great.
Look forward to seeing you, Larry.
Let me know.
Yep,
man.
My brother's on Long Island, and I got a place there. So
cool.
I'll be coming your way.
All right, brother.
All right, Larry.
Take it easy. Leo, thank you so much, man. Merry Christmas to you, buddy. Merry Christmas to all you guys. Hey, we're going to see you next week. Episode number 116, our New Year's Eve episode. We've got Grammy-winning producer, beat maker, and YouTuber Justin Henny the Business Henderson's going to be right here on the show. Before that, you can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Podcast, YouTube, and Spotify, all as Roadie Free Radio. Check out the website, roadiefreeradio.com. Send me a note because I want to hear from you. That's info@roadiefreeradio.com. And my friends, as always, please be safe out there. No roadies, no rock and roll.